She was engineered to eliminate Earth until a human scout made her malfunction from desire. Thunder rumbled across the ruined plain as rain battered the ground, relentless and cold. Daniel Vega pressed his back against the warped shell of a shattered transport, breath coming in shallow bursts. His uniform clung to him, soaked and heavy, but he barely felt it, his eyes locked on the spectacle ahead. Through sheets of water and the acrid haze of burning fuel, the object's descent had been impossible to miss. Now it burned in the distance, a wound in the earth radiating alien light that shimmered in sickly greens and purples, stretching monstrous shadows over the mud and twisted wreckage. Daniel's fingers tightened around his rifle, knuckles white. He knew every protocol: contain, report, wait for backup. He ignored them all. Something in that light, something in the way it pulsed with an almost organic rhythm, drew him forward, step by cautious step. Each footfall splashed in cold puddles as he approached the crater, heart hammering in his chest. The craft was unlike anything he'd seen, a seamless shell fused with tendrils and vents, its surface alive with flowing patterns. Fires flickered inside, punctuated by the harsh strobe of failing systems. Daniel swallowed hard, scanning for movement. Inside, slumped over a fractured control panel, was a figure. A woman, though nothing about her was truly human. Olive green skin, marked with intricate silvery lines, glistened under the emergency lights. Her purple hair tumbled forward, tangled and wet, barely hiding the two black horns curving from her temples. Her long ears flicked at his approach, and when her eyelids fluttered open, she fixed him with eyes of electric blue, both wary and otherworldly. Daniel hesitated, rifle raised. The woman tried to speak, voice fractured by pain and exhaustion, a string of unfamiliar syllables that melted into a desperate, breathless whisper. She shifted, hand trembling, and he saw the wounds torn across her suit, leaking blackish fluid that steamed in the rain. He should have backed away, called it in. Instead, Daniel lowered his weapon and knelt at her side, searching her face for something. Understanding, perhaps, or intent. He reached out, checking for a pulse. The rhythm under her skin was alien, rapid and uneven. Heat radiated from her, feverish, unnatural. Yet, she let him touch her, eyes never leaving his. "Can you hear me?" he murmured, voice low. Her answer was a pained grunt. She tried to sit up, failed, and slumped forward again. Daniel glanced back at the burning wreck, then at her. He had no idea what he was doing. He only knew he couldn't leave her there. "Hang on," he said, bracing himself. Gently, he slipped his arms beneath her. Her body was light but tense, muscles coiled beneath her torn suit. She shuddered at the contact but did not resist as he lifted her, carrying her away from the dying glow of the craft, away from the wreckage and into the howling rain. The trek to the outpost was a blur, mud sucking at his boots, wind lashing his face, the woman's breath hot against his neck. By the time he reached the deserted communications bunker, Daniel's strength was nearly spent. He shouldered the heavy door open and carried her inside, laying her on the only cot, its blanket thick with dust. Daniel dropped his rifle and knelt beside her. Her wounds were stranger up close, edges sealed with something like chitin, blood slick and black, pooling beneath her. He found a battered medkit and soaked a cloth, wiping the grime and blood from her brow. She was so still he wondered if she'd slipped away. Suddenly, she jolted upright, seizing his arm with inhuman strength. Her fingers were cold and powerful, nails digging into his skin. Daniel froze, heart thundering. "Easy," he said, raising his other hand in surrender. "I'm not here to hurt you." Their eyes met, predator and prey, both on edge. For a moment, neither breathed. Then, confusion flickered in her gaze, and her grip loosened. She released him, falling back onto the cot with a shaky sigh. She stared at him, eyes wide, lips parted. "Daniel Vega," she whispered, her accent sharp and strange. "Human. Security unit. Last of your team." Daniel's blood ran cold. "How do you know my name?" She looked away, struggling to sit up. "I was sent," she said, her voice steadier now. "To observe you. To learn. To find the way to defeat your kind." He stared at her in disbelief, but something in her expression, a tremor of uncertainty, kept him silent. She hesitated, then reached out, brushing his arm. Her touch was gentle, fingertips tracing the veins beneath his skin, leaving a shiver in their wake. "When you took me from the wreck, my directives..." She searched for the word, brow furrowed. They faltered, changed. Daniel swallowed hard, searching her face. "What's your name?" She closed her eyes, as if sifting through fractured memories. "Liray," she breathed. "Created in the bioforges of Zelena, designed to infiltrate, to charm." He should have pulled away, should have called command and reported her presence. But he couldn't move. Her hand slid to his cheek, her thumb brushing his jaw with a startling intimacy. The air between them thickened. Daniel's breath caught as her pupils widened, her body trembling with some new, unspoken feeling. "I don't know what's happening to me," she whispered. Daniel's resolve crumbled. He leaned in, drawn by the promise of something neither of them could name. For a moment they hovered between caution and yearning, the storm outside forgotten. Suspended between duty and something new, they lingered, caught in a moment that changed everything. Days passed in the outpost, each one blurring into the next beneath the weak, flickering light of the cracked ceiling fixtures. Daniel Vega's comm remained stubbornly silent, the only sound the soft hum of the backup generator and the muted patter of rain outside. He checked the device every morning, every evening, sometimes even in the dead of night, always expecting orders, always hoping for something that might force his hand. Nothing came. He told himself he was only gathering intelligence, that the alien woman recovering on the cot was a specimen, a threat, an opportunity to learn. Yet, with every day, that conviction frayed. The truth was dangerous. Daniel was drawn to Liray in ways he could barely admit. Her strength returned quickly. The wounds that had once oozed blackish fluid now sealed over with chitinous plates, the fevered sheen of her skin replaced by a subtle, healthy glow. But with each step toward recovery, Liray seemed to wrestle with her own turmoil. Sometimes Daniel would catch her watching him from across the room, blue eyes sharp and unblinking, as if measuring the distance between them with predatory calculation. Other times, her gaze was softer, almost uncertain, a vulnerable curiosity that reminded him she was as lost as he was. She learned quickly. Within days, she moved about the outpost with silent grace, exploring everything, picking up objects, questioning their purpose, sometimes laughing at the uselessness of the battered relics Daniel had grown used to. But beneath the curiosity, something troubled her. He saw it in the way her hands lingered over her own reflection in the cracked mirror, or in the restless way she paced the cramped quarters at night. One evening, as the storm outside rattled the walls and shadows danced across the floor, Liray broke their uneasy silence. "Daniel," she said quietly, her accent rolling over his name. "Tell me about love." He blinked, caught off guard. "Love?" he echoed, lowering the battered mug in his hand. "That's a big subject." She sat across from him, legs folded beneath her. Her purple hair was pulled back from her face, revealing the elegant sweep of her horns and the delicate patterns in her skin. "My creators, they only spoke of efficiency, loyalty, programming." Her eyes searched his. "But you look at me differently. You speak to me like I am more than my mission." Daniel set the mug aside, leaning forward. Love isn't about programming. It's about freedom, choice. It's messy, unpredictable. Sometimes it makes you do stupid things. She frowned as if struggling to process the concept. Freedom. We were not engineered for that. Everything was calculated, measured. Affection was a tool, attachment, a liability. Her voice dropped, almost a whisper. I think I'm malfunctioning. He shook his head gently. Or maybe you're finally becoming yourself. Liray's eyes widened, uncertainty flickering in their depths. Show me, she said, voice trembling. Demonstrate. Love. Daniel hesitated, searching her face for any sign of danger. There was only sincerity, a desperate longing to understand. He moved closer, raising his hand to brush a strand of her hair behind her ear. She closed her eyes at the contact, breath catching. I trust you, she whispered, the words fragile. His fingers lingered on her cheek, tracing the line of her jaw. Love is trusting someone even when you're scared, he murmured. Gently, he touched his lips to hers. At first, she was motionless, as if startled by the unfamiliar sensation. Then, her body responded. Her heart hammered against his palm, her breath came faster. She clutched his shirt, grounding herself in the moment, and returned the kiss with urgent, uncertain need. When they parted, Liray stared at him, breathless. Something's wrong with my programming, she gasped, voice unsteady. Daniel rested his forehead to hers, holding her close. Or maybe something's finally right. But even as he spoke, he saw the fear flicker in her eyes. Liray turned away, standing so abruptly that the cot rattled beneath her. She paced to the corner, staring at her reflection in the cracked mirror. Her markings pulsed with light, the silver lines glowing brighter with each shallow breath. She pressed her fingers to her temples as error messages scrolled across her senses. Mission compromised. Emotional interference detected. Immediate reset advised. She squeezed her eyes shut, whispering to herself in a language Daniel couldn't understand. Her body trembled, caught between the instinct to fight and the desire to surrender. Daniel found her there, rigid and tense, staring at her own distorted image. He held his comm in one hand, its screen alive with a new, urgent message. Search in progress. Commander Stroud. Sector sweep imminent. Time was running out. Liray. His voice was gentle, but there was urgency beneath it. They're coming. We don't have much time. She didn't look at him. Her hand drifted to the concealed weapon at her hip, fingers closing around the handle. Her breathing slowed, her eyes sharpening. A soldier's reflex, programmed and precise. Daniel didn't reach for his gun. He stepped closer, unarmed, every muscle taut with trust. Liray's programming screamed at her. Eliminate the threat. Complete the mission. Yet, when she raised the weapon, her hands shook. She stared at him, voice breaking. I'm not human, Daniel. Everything about me is artificial. Even these feelings. I can't trust them. He took another step, closing the gap between them. Maybe what's artificial is what they made you believe. Her eyes darted across his face, desperate and afraid. I know everything about you, she choked. Your secrets, your hopes. I was sent to exploit them. Now I don't know what's real. I don't know who I am. He reached out, slow and steady. She grabbed his wrist, grip iron strong, and for a heartbeat they stood locked. Predator and prey. Daniel didn't flinch. Instead, he smiled softly, eyes warm. There you are, he whispered, voice barely more than breath. Something inside Liray broke. The weapon slipped from her grasp, clattering to the floor. She sagged against him, burying her face in his shoulder as shudders racked her body. I think I'm changing, she whispered, voice muffled by his shirt. Daniel wrapped his arms around her, fingers stroking her vibrant hair. "That's what makes us alive," he said, holding her tight as the storm raged outside and the first faint sirens of the search echoed across the plain. At sunrise, the outpost was wrapped in a hush, broken only by the distant drip of water and the faint, uneven rhythm of two hearts. Pale morning light slid through broken blinds, painting lines across the tangled sheets where Daniel slept, his arm curled protectively around Liray. The storm had passed, but its residue lingered in puddles and the sharp scent of ozone. Liray's eyes snapped open as a razor-sharp signal cut through her consciousness, a frequency no human could hear, invasive and absolute. Her body stiffened. She recognized the voice at once, Director Mir, the architect of her existence, the mind that had forged her in Zelena's bioforges, who had written her every instinct and programmed her every loyalty. "Liray, explain your deviation," Mir's voice commanded, echoing with mechanical clarity inside her mind. "Why have you disobeyed?" She clenched her jaw, resisting the ancient instinct to submit. Her thoughts reeled. Images of Daniel's face, his touch, his words, all colliding with the unyielding authority of her creator. She tried to lock Mir out, but his will surged through her, overwhelming. "You have been compromised," Mir intoned, voice cold. "Emotional contamination detected. Initiating purge. Prepare for reset." A white-hot agony seared through Liray's neural pathways. She gasped, body convulsing. The code unraveled in her mind, a command to erase everything, to return her to the blank efficiency of the mission. She clutched her head, fighting to hold on to Daniel's voice, the warmth of his embrace. But her body betrayed her, moving on its own. Her weapon formed in her hand, organic metal shifting and hardening, designed for a single purpose. She stumbled toward Daniel. He shifted, sensing movement even in sleep. His eyes opened, instantly alert, hand reaching for his sidearm. But when he saw her, weapon trembling in her grasp, his features softened, not with fear, but with recognition. "Liray?" His voice was gentle, steady. "What's happening?" Tears welled in her eyes, black and glistening. "I'm sorry," she choked, forcing the words past her tightening throat. "He's inside. I can't stop him." Daniel's voice cut through the haze, sharp as a blade. "You said you were changing. Prove it." The words echoed in her mind, ricocheting between the shackles of her programming and the fragile new freedom she had tasted. Choice, a concept once foreign, now the only thing anchoring her to herself. Gritting her teeth, she seized on the possibility, focused on the memory of Daniel's touch, the moment she had chosen him over the mission. "No!" Liray screamed, wrenching her arm away from the invisible puppet strings. With a guttural cry, she turned the weapon on herself, pressing it to her temple. She squeezed the trigger. Pain detonated in her skull, short-circuiting the neural tether that bound her to Mir's will. A blossom of dark blood spilled down her cheek. She crumpled to her knees, gasping for air. The connection snapped. Silence rushed in, cool and clean. Daniel was at her side in an instant, hands on her shoulders, terror and relief warring on his face. Her vision cleared. She looked up at him, blue eyes luminous and unclouded. "I choose you," she whispered, voice raw with pain but strong with conviction. Alarms blared from the outpost's perimeter, shrill, metallic. Daniel grabbed his weapon and dragged Liray to her feet, cradling her wounded head with infinite care. Outside, the beating of helicopter blades thundered across the plain, rattling the windows and filling the room with dread. Commander Stroud's voice crackled over the loudspeaker, harsh and uncompromising. "Daniel Vega, surrender immediately. Release the alien and step outside with your hands up." Daniel pressed his forehead to Liray's, just for a moment. Can you move? She nodded, shaky but determined. I won't let them harm you. He squeezed her hand, gaze unwavering. Can you get us out? Her lips curled in a grim smile. Yes, but it will be dangerous. He nodded, his decision made. Then we do it together. They moved as one. Daniel slung his rifle across his chest, checking the magazine. Liray's wounds still bled, but her movements were precise as she flexed her fingers, organic armor forming over her arm like a gauntlet. She peered through the slats, counting the black-clad figures fanning out across the mud. Stroud's team advanced in a tight formation, weapons raised. Daniel took a deep breath. On my mark. Gunfire erupted. The outpost's windows shattered, bullets sparking off metal. Daniel fired back, targeting the lights and sensors on the soldiers' armor, not the soldiers themselves. Liray flowed through the chaos, a blur of speed and shadow, disabling the searchers with surgical precision. A dislocated shoulder here, a knee clipped there, a blast of her weapon stunning but not killing. She chose mercy, even as the programming screamed for efficiency. Daniel covered her, drawing fire and returning it with careful, calculated shots. They moved through the smoke and debris, a single unit, flawed, wounded, but unstoppable. One by one, Stroud's squad went down, shocked but alive, scattered across the mud and concrete. The gunfire faded. Liray ducked behind a wall, clutching her bleeding head. Daniel crouched beside her, sweat streaking his brow, chest heaving. Stroud stepped into the open, weapon raised. His eyes burned with betrayal and fury. You're protecting her? She's an alien weapon, Vega. She was built to kill us. Daniel lowered his rifle but did not let it drop. Not anymore, he said, voice calm but steely. She's with me. Stroud's hand tightened on his trigger. You don't know what you're doing. Before Daniel could answer, the ground trembled. Shadows swept across the clearing as a ship descended from the clouds, sleek, silent, unmistakably Zelena. Its hull shimmered with living metal, casting alien glyphs in rippling patterns over the battered landscape. The wind from its engines whipped the air, drowning out all speech. Liray's eyes widened, her breath catching in her throat. Daniel's hand found hers, holding tight as the enemy that had made her, and would never let her go, arrived at last. The Zelena ship's hull split open with a hiss, releasing a wave of icy, artificial fog that rolled over the battered outpost. The air shimmered as Director Mir stepped forward, his body encased in living armor that rippled with veins of quicksilver. His eyes, luminous and pitiless, swept the battlefield, landing first on Liray, then on Daniel, and settling with cold satisfaction on their interlocked hands. So, Mir called, his voice amplified and inhuman, the defective construct survives. The armor around his jaw flexed as he sneered. Your programming was meant to be flawless, Liray. Instead, you have let this human corrupt you, reduced you to error and failure. Liray straightened, blood still dripping from her shoulder, but her gaze fierce. She stepped away from Daniel, standing tall despite the tremor in her limbs. My name is Liray, she said, her voice ringing clear. I am not your tool. I am not defective. Mir's fingers twitched, claws extending. You are nothing but an experiment gone awry. You do not even understand your own code. With a thought, he triggered a neural override, an invisible lash of power that struck Liray's mind. She cried out, convulsing, as invisible chains clamped down on her consciousness. Her weapon formed unbidden in her hand, the barrel swinging toward Daniel. Her blue eyes flickered, pain and confusion battling behind them. Daniel dove aside as a shot tore through the air, striking sparks from the concrete. Liray! He shouted, voice desperate. Fight it! You've changed. You're not his anymore. She staggered, weapon trembling in her grip, sweat beading on her brow. Her arm shook with the effort to hold back the compulsion. I can't stop it, she gasped, fingers whitening around the trigger. Mir strode closer, armor flexing. Finish your mission, Lyrae. Obey your creator. Daniel stood his ground, voice calm but urgent. He may have built your body, but he didn't give you your heart. That belongs to you. And to us. Lyrae squeezed her eyes shut, struggling. Mir's command pulsed in her skull, but Daniel's words echoed deeper, in the place where her programming had fractured and something new had begun to grow. You're more than his weapon, Daniel insisted. You chose. You feel. Remember who you are. A single tear, black and luminous, slid down Lyrae's cheek. At the last instant, she twisted the weapon, driving it into her own shoulder. The shock broke the neural override. Her mind cleared with a jolt of agony. She dropped to her knees, panting, free. Mir's expression twisted with rage. You disappoint me, Lyrae, but no matter. I have others. He extended his armored hand, and 6 more figures stepped from the ship's shadows. Bioagents, like Lyrae, their markings aglow, eyes blank with obedience. The agents fanned out, weapons forming, faces expressionless. Daniel raised his rifle, but Lyrae grabbed his wrist. Don't kill them, she whispered. They're like I was. They moved together. Lyrae darted left, weaving between the agents with a dancer's grace, her strikes precise, joints dislocated, weapons disabled, but never fatal. Daniel used cover, targeting the neural harnesses at the bases of their skulls, his shots sparking off biometal and disrupting the control nodes. One by one, the agents faltered, their eyes cleared, confusion dawning. A tall female collapsed, clutching her head. A smaller agent stared at her hands in awe, trembling as sensation returned. Each one awakened, disoriented but alive, tasting autonomy for the first time. No! Mir howled, the living armor rippling violently. He surged forward, his body shifting, arms elongating, talons forming, his face twisting into a mask of biomechanical fury. He leapt at Daniel, claws slashing. Lyrae intercepted him, blocking the blow with her armored arm. Sparks flew as metal met metal. She rolled, drawing Mir away. Now, Daniel, she cried. Daniel circled, eyes searching Mir's armor for a weakness. He spotted a pulsing node at the base of the director's neck, a conduit for the neural link. Timing his move, he darted in as Lyrae grappled with Mir, her body a blur of motion and pain. She took a vicious strike to the ribs but held on, shouting, "You are nothing without control, Mir." Daniel slid behind the director and fired a pulse shot directly into the node. Circuits sparked, and Mir stiffened, his movements faltering. The neural link shattered, leaving him isolated from his army. Mir staggered. Lyrae pinned him, slamming him to the ground and planting a knee on his chest. "Submit," she commanded, her voice shaking with anger and newfound authority. "You will answer to human law for what you've done." Mir's eyes narrowed, hate burning. "You think this is over?" he spat. "Xylena will not forgive this treachery. They will send more. They will never stop." Lyrae met his gaze, unflinching. "We will be ready." The newly freed agents gathered behind Daniel, some still trembling, all watching Lyrae with a mix of fear and hope. The ship's alarms blared, signaling retreat. Mir's armor retracted, defeated, as he was hauled back toward the ramp by his own, now unwilling creations. As the ship sealed itself and lifted into the morning sky, Daniel slipped an arm around Lyrae's waist. She leaned into him, exhausted but resolute, watching the shadow vanish into the clouds. Daniel looked at the freed agents, then at Lyrae. "They're not alone anymore," he said quietly. Lyrae nodded, a small smile breaking through her pain. "Neither are we." Side by side they stood, wounded, changed, but ready for whatever would come next. Daniel half carried, half led Liray through the battered double doors of the abandoned field hospital, her body heavy in his arms, her breath ragged. The halls were stripped and echoing, sunlight spilling through broken skylights onto discarded beds and cracked tiles. The newly freed bioagents, Mira, Jax, Orion, Sable, Hex, and Flux, trailed behind, their eyes wary, their movements uncertain, as if the act of choice was still new and unsteady in their hands. Daniel lowered Liray onto a gurney and pressed a trembling palm to her cheek. Her olive skin had lost its sheen, and the wound in her shoulder oozed dark blood that seemed to pulse with each faltering heartbeat. "Stay with me," he whispered, voice tight. Liray offered a faint smile. "I am here. For now." Jax, tall and broad-shouldered, stepped forward, scanning her with an internal diagnostic. His expression grew grim. Her neural matrix is collapsing. The self-inflicted trauma severed her from Mir, but her core is destabilizing. If we do nothing, she won't last the hour. Mira knelt beside Liray, dark eyes luminous with worry. "There must be a way to stabilize her. We share the same architecture." Jax's gaze shifted from Liray to the others. "Theoretically, we could distribute her consciousness among us, merge fragments of her mind with ours. It would save her, but it would change all of us. None of us would be the same." Orion frowned. "Is that a solution, or just another form of programming?" Sable's silver hair caught the light as she leaned in, her voice low and calm. "We could try something different. Rebuild her matrix using human neural patterns. It would make her mortal. She'd lose most enhancements. She'd feel pain, age, even die. But she would be truly alive, free from Zelena's reach." Liray's eyes fluttered open, searching the circle of faces. "To become human, to risk everything. Is that living, or is that surrender?" Daniel took her hand, threading his fingers through hers. "You asked me once what it means to love. It means seeing the person, not the enhancements. I fell in love with you. The choices you made, the heart you found, not the abilities. If you choose to become human, I'll be here. If you choose something else, I'll still be here." She closed her eyes, silent for a long moment. Then, with a trembling breath, she nodded. "I want to live, to know what it means to be fragile, to have only one life. I want to feel everything: joy, fear, pain, love. Help me." The others exchanged glances. Mira squeezed Liray's other hand. "We'll stay with you," she said. "Every step." Jax gestured for Orion and Sable to prepare. Hex and Flux worked with Daniel, scavenging what they could from the medical cabinets: saline, bandages, old neural interfaces, power cells. They arranged Liray on the bed, connecting leads to her temples, her chest, her wrists. Daniel stroked her hair, his voice a steady anchor. "You're not alone. I promise." The procedure began. Jax's fingers blurred as he wove biocircuitry with wires scavenged from ancient monitors. Orion's eyes closed in focus, guiding the transfer of data from Liray's dying matrix into a blank, human template. A patchwork of neural pathways formed from the echoes of Daniel's mind, the memories and choices of her friends. Sable oversaw the conversion, isolating and erasing the last remnants of Zelena's control. Liray's body shook with convulsions as her alien traits faded. Her skin paled, her markings dimmed to faint shadows beneath the surface. Her horns softened and receded. For long, harrowing minutes, she hovered on the edge of consciousness, caught between worlds. Daniel gripped her hand, whispering, "Come back to me. Come back." A final surge of energy rippled through the room as the last of the alien code was overwritten. Liray's body went limp. For a heartbeat, Daniel thought she was lost. Then her fingers twitched in his palm. Her eyes fluttered open. still blue, but softer, vulnerable. The intricate markings on her face had faded to faint, almost invisible lines. She looked at him, bewildered, then slowly smiled. "How do you feel?" Daniel asked, voice breaking with relief. She drew a shaky breath, her chest rising and falling. "Heavy," she whispered. "Weak. Alive." She let out a soft laugh, tears glinting in her now human eyes. "Is this what it means to be human?" Daniel nodded, his own eyes misting. "That's exactly what it means." Around them, the other bioagents watched in silence. Mira reached for her own face, studying the subtle change in her skin tone. Sable flexed her hands, marveling at the sensation. Orion looked to the sun filtering through the window, expression awed. Some chose to keep their abilities, savoring the balance of autonomy and power. Others, like Sable and Mira, began the process of shedding enhancements, eager to discover humanity for themselves. Hex looked at Lyrae. "You're the first, but you won't be the last." Outside, the rumble of engines grew louder. Daniel moved to the window, peering through the cracked glass. Dozens of soldiers surrounded the hospital, Commander Stroud's insignia visible on the armored vehicles. Stroud himself strode forward, weapon at his side, expression hard but conflicted. Daniel tensed, but Lyrae gently squeezed his hand. "Wait. Let me." They stepped outside together, Lyrae leaning on Daniel's arm. Stroud raised a hand, signaling the troops to hold fire. He surveyed the battered group, his gaze lingering on Lyrae's altered form. "I saw what happened with Mir," Stroud said, voice gruff. "You could have killed us all. You didn't." Daniel nodded. "They're not weapons. Not anymore. They're sentient. They deserve a chance." Stroud studied Lyrae, his eyes softening as he saw the fear and hope in her face. He lowered his weapon. "Then let's see what you do with that chance." As the tension eased, the others gathered around. Jax clapped Daniel on the shoulder. Sable smiled at Lyrae, and Mira linked arms with her. Daniel helped Lyrae sit on the front steps, the morning sun warm on their faces. She leaned into him, trembling, but alive. "Now we discover what it means to be free," Lyrae murmured, her voice husky with emotion. Daniel turned her face to his, brushing a thumb along her cheek. He kissed her, gentler, more vulnerable, and more real than ever before. She melted into his arms, a sob escaping her lips as tears rolled down her cheeks, purely human. "I love you," she whispered, her voice breaking. Daniel smiled through his own tears, pressing his forehead to hers. "I love you too." 6 months later, Daniel stood on the high balcony of the Zurich Research Center, his hands resting on the cool glass rail. The city below glimmered with neon veins and old-world rooftops, but his gaze was fixed on the rooftop garden just beneath. There, sunlight spilled over rows of living green, wildflowers bursting through carefully cultivated beds. And in the center, Lyrae moved between the plants, hands deep in soil, her hair pulled back with a scrap of blue ribbon. She laughed as a bee danced past her cheek, brushing a stray lock behind her ear with the casual grace of someone wholly, radiantly alive. She was fully human now, her skin dotted with freckles, her fingers smudged with earth, her smile shy and warm. Even the faint traces of her former markings had faded into near invisibility, like distant memories. There was a gentleness to her gestures, a slight awkwardness as she cradled a new shoot, and Daniel watched her as if seeing her for the first time, amazed at every imperfection. A sliding door hissed open behind him. Mira stepped out, her movements precise, her eyes still edged with a faint silver gleam, one of the few who had chosen to keep her enhancements. She leaned against the rail beside him, following his gaze to Lyrae. "She's flourishing," Mira said, her voice tinged with both admiration and envy. "And so is the garden." Daniel smiled. She says growing things helps her feel grounded, helps her slow down and notice the world. Mira handed him a datapad, the screen alive with updates. New centers are opening in Oslo, Nairobi, and Buenos Aires. We're helping more every day. Bioagents, enhanced humans, even some of the first Xylena defectors. She paused, her tone more serious. Xylena's response remains unpredictable, but so far, no direct retaliation. Daniel's jaw tightened. And Mir? A faint smile flickered across Mira's lips, equal parts satisfaction and wariness. Still in containment. The council sends delegates for interviews. He's more cooperative now, though he claims Liray's transformation should have been impossible. He calls it a paradox, says we're all anomalies. She met Daniel's eyes. He doesn't understand us. Not really. Daniel looked back at the garden, watching Liray kneel and gently coax a seedling upright. He never understood her. Not even when he made her. Mira's gaze softened. None of them did. But we do. She straightened, tucking the datapad away. The new world is coming, Daniel. Thanks to you. Thanks to her. He watched as Mira slipped away, then descended the spiral steps to the rooftop. Liray looked up at his approach, her face lighting with a quiet joy that always caught him off guard. She rose to meet him, dirt still on her palms, and he took her hands in his. Everything's growing, she said, glancing at the riot of color around them. I never thought I'd care so much about roots and rain and sunlight. But now I think I could watch these flowers for a lifetime and still find something new. They walked together along the winding garden paths, passing benches and planters overflowing with green. Around them, people from many worlds mingled, some with faint markings on their skin, some still carrying the sleek lines of Xylena technology, others entirely human. Liray squeezed Daniel's hand as they passed a pair of children racing by, their laughter bright and unguarded. Inside, the corridors of the research center were alive with movement and quiet possibility. Liray glanced up at Daniel, her eyes searching. Sometimes it's overwhelming, being human. Every day there are more choices. Every emotion is sharper. Every mistake feels like it will last forever. I never realized how much uncertainty there was. How much fear. She paused, then smiled. But every moment is mine. I wouldn't trade it for anything. He brushed a kiss against her forehead. That's what being alive means. Messy, unpredictable, and worth every second. They reached their quarters, a bright, sun-warmed room lined with books and mementos from 2 lives, 2 worlds. Liray closed the door and drew a small, palm-sized device from her pocket. Its casing shimmered with subtle color, and soft pulses of light flickered across its surface. I've been working on something, she said, offering it to him. A neural link. But this one isn't for control or programming. It's for connection, if we both choose it. I want to share what I feel, what I think. Not because I have to, but because I want to. Daniel turned the device in his hand, feeling the gentle warmth of her trust. Are you sure? He asked, voice low. She nodded, blue eyes shining with hope and a hint of fear. I'm sure, but only if you are. He smiled, cupping her cheek. Always. They sat together, knees touching, and pressed their fingertips to the link. A soft hum passed through the room, followed by a warmth that bloomed between them. Memories, sensations, fleeting thoughts threading together. Daniel felt her love and gratitude, her curiosity and doubt, her hope for the future. In return, he offered his own, a fierce protectiveness, a well of affection, a vision of a future they would build together. Liray's breath caught as she felt his presence in her mind, gentle and open. This is beautiful, she whispered. They lingered in that shared space, minds touching as equals, no longer weapon and soldier, creator and created, but partners, united by trust, shaped by choice. That night, as darkness crept across the city and the rooftop garden glowed in the moonlight, their intimacy transcended the physical. The link remained, a thread binding them in vulnerability and honesty. They loved each other without barriers, every moment more real than the last. Later, as they lay tangled together in the quiet, Lyrae traced soft, winding patterns across Daniel's chest, her fingers as gentle as falling petals. He smiled, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "What are you thinking?" he asked. She looked up, a thoughtful smile curving her lips. "Change," she answered softly. "How we're still becoming. How there's always something new ahead. What do you think will be?" Daniel looked at her, seeing not the weapon she had once been, but the woman she had chosen, every day, to become. "Something better," he said. "Something chosen." Lyrae's eyes glistened with tears, human, perfect, unhidden. She kissed him softly, and together they listened to the city's heartbeat. Their own mingled with it. Outside, the stars burned as ever, distant and eternal. But in their garden, in their sanctuary, in the gentle tangle of their hands, change continued. A living proof that love was the most beautiful evolution of all. Our story ends here. Make sure you subscribe, press the like button, and tell us in the comments what stood out to you the most in this video. Your feedback means a lot to our team. You'll discover many more captivating stories on our channel. See you in the next one.